Ahoy! We have some good news for most players. Boltcaster is getting a temporary nerf in order to offset the somewhat accidental buff that it's getting through the PvE versus PvP scaling changes, which don't affect Boltcaster due to it mainly not dealing thrust damage. So what they're doing to offset that is they disable the electrified perk, which is the elemental damage conversion, which means that it's basically a fairly standard bow with not necessarily the best combination of perks, but it also still has Bolt on top of that as an extra damage effect. However, the problem is that this also disables the Magnify effect on Boltcaster. Because of that, it just nerfs Boltcaster quite significantly, so I would assume that it's likely not really worth using for most situations. I think this is unfortunate insofar that I think Boltcaster should be a usable, viable bow, but I do understand that the fix they're trying to implement for this whole conversion thing is taking a little bit longer, so they're disabling that until that fix is in the game. I'm not quite sure why the Magnify is attached to the other effect, why that's not independent, but either way, probably not worth using until they have sorted that out. But I think it's still better than the opposite, where Boltcaster just overpowers every other weapon pretty much. And with this change, they also announced another change to a change they announced yesterday. So they disabled the winged leather shoes speedy perk as well in the same way, because there was an issue where you basically had the effect permanently. And today they announced that this change will also temporarily disable the Magnify attribute on winged leather shoes, so they're absolutely not worth using either. So this seems to be a pattern with disabling these effects. They all seem to be tied to the Magnify, which I hope they can disconnect from each other in the future so they can just disable specific perks. And last but not least, also something they announced yesterday but they didn't get around to talking about, the change to the influence races. Going back to what it's like on most servers, it was, I think, Abaton in particular that had a different variation here. They were testing a new influence race format with multiple races going at once, but less races per day, and that didn't really succeed, so now everything is back to the old standard, and I guess they're gonna experiment further. Just some small changes here overall, but good to hear in my opinion. So if you want to have updates like this in the future, then consider subscribing and clicking the bell if you haven't yet. And if you want to support me further, you can do so on Patreon. Thanks to my patrons who I do exactly that. And thank you for watching. Sloth out.